I think one of the key measures of success or key paths to success is really to strike the right balance between not over communicating, but also not under communicating. If you over communicate, then you may share information that is more frightening because, again, the people only have a very limited knowledge about what's happening in your world, in your country, in your region. But if you under communicate, they will also assume that you're not doing anything, that you may not even have it under control. And spinning this, or controlling, not spinning, but controlling a narrative in that setup is so super important. And I think it's something that when I started my role 4.5 years ago, I wasn't aware of then. I wasn't aware of how important that is and how much of and it's when we started talking, when we started working together, I realized I needed to communicate more, because just doing the right thing all the time may be great and may lead to success long-term, but it may completely destroy everything in the midterm, because some people may think, well, I don't even see that you're doing anything, right? I don't, it destroys confidence. So I think striking that right balance is key.
Okay, I love that, Tobias. And so I thought of another question, and I don't know if there's a right answer to this question. So this may just be a question with no right answer. But some of my client organizations that my leaders work in, they have a certain kind of appetite for communication. So some organizations, they only want to hear positive. I want to hear what's going on well.
Yeah.
And they want to hear that. Other organizations share more with what's broken. And it kind of speaks to the point you just said. You know, we don't want to over communicate because that could frighten. We don't want to under communicate because that could frighten.
Yeah.
And so there's this balance, and in that balance, some of it's positive things, some of it's not so positive. So do you have a recommended mix? If we were cooking at home and we were going to put these ingredients in the recipe, how much problems do you share and how much wins do you share? Is there a right balance?
That's an excellent question. I just this week, and I mentioned that I work for MHP, but MHP owned by Porsche. I did a Porsche experience and I had some CEOs over. So we were seven CEOs and we were talking over dinner, and one of my friends made the comment. He said, the best advice I can give you in negotiations is just don't say anything. So I think, and it's not my natural not to say anything. I'm somebody who over communicates. So to answer your question, what is the right mix? What's the right recipe? That's difficult. I think from a negotiation standpoint, if you're in a situation where you want to negotiate, where you have something that you want to get out, well, you have to listen to what the others are saying, what they're thinking, where their head's at. You have to ideally not say too much. And in fact, asking the question of, well, tell me, like, where's your head at? Or like, what are you thinking? And then waiting is probably a good advice, generally speaking, and also in this international relationship, because very often you don't know where their head's at because you haven't been there. In fact, for me, one of the challenges is I often get pulled into situations where somebody's already made up their mind. They've been told facts, either right or wrong. They've heard some information, they got some data points, and they come to me in a meeting, global meeting, and they think they already know everything. So now, for me, one of the key things is in that recipe to say, all right, help me understand, what is your understanding of the situation? So in a good meeting, I manage that. In a not so good meeting, I get into a defensive corner, and then I start communicating, and I try to frame the situation, and I may over communicate. And over communication is always a tricky thing, because sometimes it may add value because people all of a sudden hear things they didn't know, they weren't aware of. But in a leadership, when I communicate with the board, with, let's say, the senior leadership, they don't want to hear too much, right? They don't want to hear me explain anything, and they want to just understand the situation and make a decision. So it's a trust thing as well, right? So it's not only, but it's a trust thing. And you probably have to look at how much do you trust the other person? How much do they know you? And that's what I usually look at. So coming back to that recipe, not saying too much when you're unsure of what the other side wants is probably key. Second, understanding what your trust level is with somebody, on how deep you may want to open up is a second thing that I usually look at, and where I try to understand, what do I want to share? How much can I share? And then be truthful. So now, so I'm a Rotarian. I've been with Rotary for a long time now. And one of the core values is that we always ask, is it the truth? There's 4 questions that we ask at the beginning of every meeting. The first question is it the truth? Now, in an international relationship, you don't have many chances to prove that you're a trustworthy person. So trying to spin things in a certain way, trying to sugarcoat things, my personal advice is always, that's not good, right? It's like the bare facts help. Now, at the same time, when you ask me, you said, well, what else? Like, what is it? Like, how do you spin this or how do you manage this relationship in a good way? I strongly believe that it's you have to know what to say to whom, but also then physically meet face to face.